In today's video, we are going to make a dog Christmas stocking. I made this little size yesterday just to test how I wanted to put it together. And I think it is such a cute size to be like a gift for your favorite dogs in your life that you can get this template for free. There'll be a link in the video below. And then we are going to make a full-size one with this same fabric. So this is a really cute dog print that I got at Hobby Lobby. I absolutely love the contrast of it. Just like with this one, I'm going to put red on the inside. You could use a Christmas print if you want to, but I'm just keeping it kind of modern and bold. I picked up this collar at the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to use this as the hook on the full-size stocking. I just think that'll really add some fun and whimsy to it. And then I plan on adding these jingle bells that I also picked up at Hobby Lobby when I was there grabbing this fabric, just to give it a real Christmas feel. So I have 2 pieces of fabric, and I'm going to show you why I cut them this way in a moment. Now, if you're doing a directional fabric like this, you do need to pay attention to how you lay out the pattern and also how you sew it together. And I'm going to fold it in half. And then you're going to either make a pattern, or you can get the full-size stocking pattern in my Etsy shop along with printer-friendly directions for how to put this together. So you're going to cut these apart and tape them together on these dashed lines, and we're going to place that on the fold. Now, because this is a dog bone and it is symmetrical, if you prefer not to cut on a fold, you can always print this twice and make a full-size pattern. But I figure, why cut around this shape twice when we can place it on a fold and cut it once? So I'm going to pin this on here and cut that out. We're going to need 4 of these shapes, 2 for the outside and 2 for the lining. Now, the outside, if you wanted to, you could do the dogs on the front or whatever you want on the front and do a plain back to your stocking. I'm going to use this same print on the front and the back, and then I'm going to use red for the lining. And I'm just going to take my fabric scissors and I'm going to cut all the way around. Now, there's a few options. Because you need 2 of these, you could cut them at the same time. But I feel like with curves like this, sometimes they don't end up matching really well when you're cutting 2 folded things at the same time. So I'm going to show you a little trick that I came up with from making a bunch of baby bibs recently. This has nothing to do with baby bibs, but I'm going to use what I call my baby bib technique. So we have 1 bone cut out, and you need to make sure that when you sew this together that you remember to leave the top open and not the bottom. I might have done the bottom open on that small one the first time I did it, but you want to make sure it is the top that is left open. So I'm going to turn this over, and on the pattern, there are some little lines to show you where to mark. So I'm just going to mark these little lines right here on the back of my fabric. We are going to stitch all the way around and leave the top completely open. But instead of cutting another shape just like this, I am just going to pin this onto this piece of fabric, because we are going to have to trim all around this with pinking shears or cutting curves later anyway. So I find this to be a more efficient way of working. And then we're going to sew all the way around between these 2 points with a 1/4 inch seam from the edge of the cut fabric. And because there are so many curves and we want it to have a nice curve when we turn and press it, I'm going to use a pretty small stitch. I usually use a 1.8 to a 2.0, because the smaller your stitch, the better curve you're going to have when you turn and press the fabric. So if you're doing straight lines, you can get away with much larger stitches, but when you're doing curves, the smaller the stitch, the better your curve. Now I'm going to cut out 1 red piece, and I'm going to pin together the same way for the lining. So I'm stitching right along the edge of the cut red bone onto the rectangle. It's a little bit hard to see, but it really does save us a little bit of time since we're going to have to cut all those curves later. And on the area where I'm going to be turning the whole thing right side out, I'm going to go back and forth and not just knot, because there'll be a little bit more strain at that area, and I like to reinforce it. Now we have the bone shape sewn onto the rectangle for both the outside and the lining pieces. I'm a fan of pinking shears. They are, they're not the easiest to squeeze always, but The action of the squeezing like this, these fiskers, is a lot easier on your thumb. It uses the tendon very differently, and you can get these curves clipped a lot faster. And this is why I like to sew a shape onto an uncut piece of fabric instead of cutting the shape twice and then having to do this anyway. It just saves me a step. I'm just going to trim close to the curves without cutting any of the stitching. Using a combination of the pinking shears on the curves and straight scissors on the straight sections and on the unsewn curves at the top of the stocking to just get this done and ready as quickly and efficiently as possible. I'm going to set that aside, and now we're going to do the red. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to use the straight scissors on the straightaways and the unsewn curved edge and the pinking shears on the sewn curved. Now we are going to turn our outside right side out. Now I am using a duck cloth, which gives this stocking a little bit of shape and stability. If you're using two cottons or thinner cottons, you might want to add some fusible fleece to the outside. So you could just iron that on the lining or the outside fabric before you start all of your cutting and sewing. But if I'm using flannel or a duck cloth, I usually just use the fabrics and don't add any extra padding. So this is still inside out. This one is right side out. Now we are going to put the exterior inside the lining. You don't have to worry about really getting it matched up well down in here. We need to match these top edges. So we're going to start by matching these seams. You can use pins, but I like to use clips on this section. We're just going to get these edges lined up. But before we pin all the way around, you don't want to forget about the hanger section. So on the sample that I did, the small one, I just used ribbon and I put it right in that seam. See there? So I put that in, here. So I put it coming down here, just clipped it right in there. But I'm not sure I love where it is. It hangs okay, but I don't love it. For the bigger one, I want it up here. So I want it kind of at the top of the curve on one side. And I want to make it more interesting because I want to really bring the dog accent in here. So I want to use the collar. We're going to open this up. So we're going to put half in here and half in here, but we need to decide how long we want it to be. I am really just going to eyeball it. And I'm not going to give you measurements because every collar might be a little bit different. Just looking at where the pieces are, where this thing is, where that is, where this hook is going to be, because you'll hang it like that. And then I'm just going to cut about 1/4 to 1/2 inch down from there. Just close your eyes and do it. It was only $1.25, got that at the Dollar Tree. So this side is a single piece, and this side is a double piece. I'm going to take a lighter, I'm going to quickly melt these raw ends so that they're not going to fray. By burning or melting the edges, you can reduce your bulk because you don't have to fold this over. You can just fold it in half and sew it together. Make sure if there is a design on your webbing, like the one that I got, make sure that is going to be on the outside when the clip looks like this. So then when it clicks together, it's going to be like that. You don't want this sewn raw edge on the outside. So just double check that. And then this was how it was going to be. So this one's a lot shorter than this one because we're planning on this kind of staying straight when the stocking is hanging. So we're going to put this at the top curve on one side. So what you're going to do is you're going to take this and put it in between these layers so that you're seeing the back. This is really important because we need to make sure we line both of these up in the same direction so it doesn't look twisted once this is sewn and turned. I mean, if it does, we can always use our seam ripper and fix it. It'll be okay. But the goal is to not have that happen. So then you're going to turn this over and you're going to have this one upside down. You're going to put it in here and you're going to line it up So it's at the same place. See right there? It's at the same place on the curve as the last one. Now, because I'm kind of paranoid, let's just kind of sneak that out and make sure that it's going to be right. That'll flip up like that, and that'll clip like that. Okay, I think we've got it right. So now I'm just going to clip the rest of the way around, and then we are going to sew all the way around the top with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Again, using a small stitch length, like a 1.8 to a 2.0, because this is a lot of curve in this area. We are almost done. We're going to be turning it right side out. And if you want to turn it right side out and just test that hook before you use the pinking shears on that side, it's probably not a bad idea. So let's do that. Worked perfectly. Okay. Now I'm going to put that back in there. The reason you want to test before you do the pinking shears is that if you need to flip it, like if it got twisted and you needed to flip one, you would want to pull the seam out and restitch it while there's still more fabric and it's not pinked, like the pinking shear triangles aren't in there. So now we're going to grab these one last time, and you're going to carefully clip the curves. I'm not clipping the dog collar because honestly, I'm not sure that I can. And I know for sure it's not going to feel good on my wrist to do that. So I'm just going to skip that spot. So I would love to know who you are going to make a dog stocking for. You're going to make it for your own fur babies, or you're going to make it for your grand dogs. You're going to make them to sew and sell. And then what would you put in them? Are you going to get them some toys, some treats? Let me know in the comments what you would put in a dog stocking for Christmas. So we have that all trimmed. Now we're going to turn this right side out through the lining. It's going to look a little bit weird at first. Before we put the lining into the outside, we need to close this hole. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to iron all the way around. So I'm going to get this nice and pushed out. I'm going to iron that. I'm going to iron that. Then I'm going to pin this together. And I'm just going to use my machine and sew really close to the edge. If you wanted this to be a reversible stocking, you could hand stitch that so that no one would see it, but this isn't going to be reversible because this is definitely the better side. So I'm just going to put red thread in my machine and sew straight down there. I pressed the two ends and I sewed the turning spot closed. You can barely see it because I used the red thread that matched. Now we are just going to push the lining inside the exterior, and then we're going to get the bone sections. Can't really show you because I'm doing it inside, but we're just going to get that smoothed out on the inside. Then you're just going to pull this part to create the bone shape on the top, basically getting to the seams where the white and the red are sewn together. Then I'm going to take it back to the ironing board, and I'm just going to press that edge nice and flat. Then if you want to top stitch, you can. You could use a color. You could use white on the outside, red on the inside so that it doesn't really show. Or you can just leave it ironed. So for my little mini one, I just left it. I decided not to top stitch, but because this one is so big, I think I am going to top stitch it just to keep that part together properly. Using this for the hanging made it really easy to top stitch around it because it stayed in two pieces. So now you're just going to clip it together, and it's a long hook, but I love it. It is super cute. We could have maybe made it a little bit shorter here, but you know, shoulda, coulda, woulda next time. If you want it to be shorter, make it shorter. But I'm glad I kept this on because these jingle bells came with a string. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut that knot off. I'm going to tie it right onto that D-ring and just trim that. And so now it's just a really fun and kind of modern dog stocking ready for the holidays.